Has King Charles just erased Prince Harry from the royal family and sent his own son spiraling into collapse? In a stunning twist shaking the monarchy to its core, King Charles has reportedly declared he has only one son, officially disowning Prince Harry. Tonight, we're uncovering the moment Harry allegedly broke down in Montecito, the secret palace conversations that led to this royal rupture, and how this single statement could change the future of the British throne forever. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear may be the royal family's biggest scandal yet. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would you do if the very family that shaped your identity suddenly declared you didn't belong to them anymore? Imagine waking up one morning to the headlines screaming that your father, no less than the King of England, has officially disowned you, proclaiming he has only one son left. Now imagine you're Prince Harry, the man whose entire existence has played out under the world's relentless gaze, who fought for a different life, only to find himself standing alone, perhaps for the first time in a way that feels absolute. This is not just royal gossip. This is seismic. A story with the power to shake the House of Windsor to its very foundations, to stir old wounds in a nation still grappling with questions of monarchy, loyalty, and the price of independence. And right now, it's unfolding in the sun-drenched streets of Montecito, California, far from the Gothic arches of Buckingham Palace, but closer than ever to the fractured heart of one man who used to be a prince and may, depending on who you ask, still be one in name, if no longer in the eyes of his father. Welcome to the story of Prince Harry's alleged collapse in Montecito, a story that's been whispered about in elite circles, hinted at in tabloids, and speculated over by royal watchers across the globe. But beyond the screaming headlines, what really happened? Did Harry truly collapse in a physical sense? Or is this a collapse of a different kind, a breaking point, an emotional implosion after years of tension and estrangement? And why, after so many years of behind-the-scenes negotiations, half-truths, and public statements calling for space and healing, did King Charles decide, so publicly and so definitively, to declare he has only one son? In the next few minutes and thousands of words, we're going to peel back every layer of this royal crisis. We'll trace the journey that brought Harry to Montecito, examine the delicate threads that connected him to the monarchy, and explore the moment when those threads snapped. We'll hear from sources close to the palace, from friends who've stood by Harry's side, and from critics who argue this was inevitable. We'll look at history to see whether the British crown has ever gone this far before. And, perhaps most crucially, we'll try to answer the question everyone is asking. Is there a way back for Harry? Or has the door slammed shut for good? But before we go further, let's rewind. Because to understand the gravity of what's happening today, we have to remember who Harry was and who he wanted to become. He was the so-called spare, a boy born into unimaginable privilege, yet marked from the moment of birth as second best. Second in line to the throne when he arrived in September 1984, overshadowed by his older brother William, destined to play supporting roles while William prepared to inherit the crown. Harry once joked that he was there in case something happened to his brother. A grim reality for any child, but especially for a boy growing up in the tabloid era, where every youthful misstep became front-page fodder. He was also the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin. The image of 12-year-old Prince Harry, head bowed, eyes dark with shock, is forever seared into the world's collective memory. The boy who, years later, would admit he struggled with anger, grief, and the suffocating scrutiny of the press. For a while, he tried to follow the royal script: military service, public duties, charity engagements. But even then, the strain showed. Rumors of wild partying, a few unfortunate headlines about costumes and Vegas nights. Harry the rebel prince. Harry the unpredictable one. Harry, who always seemed a bit too human for a life measured out in carefully choreographed photo ops. Then came Meghan Markle, an American actress, biracial, divorced, outspoken. To some, Meghan was a breath of fresh air, a modern Cinderella who would bring new energy into the monarchy. To others, she was an outsider who didn't understand the royal code. Don't complain, don't explain, keep the dirty laundry behind palace walls. Their whirlwind romance lit up the world's press, culminating in a wedding watched by nearly 2 billion people. For a moment, it seemed Harry might finally have found peace, purpose, and a partner who understood the weight of his royal chains. But the fairy tale curdled. Fast. Allegations of palace leaks. Reports of Meghan making Kate cry, or was it the other way around? A relentless barrage of negative press, fueled by a toxic mix of racism, class snobbery, and royal traditionalism. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan stunned the world by announcing they were stepping back from royal duties. They wanted financial independence. They wanted to protect their mental health. They wanted out. At first, there were cautious statements from the palace, filled with words like support and understanding. But behind closed doors, insiders whispered that the atmosphere was frosty, even hostile. Harry and Meghan fled to Canada, then Los Angeles, eventually settling in Montecito, a glittering enclave of celebrity wealth, privacy, and sunshine. Yet despite the palm trees and Pacific breezes, Harry's troubles didn't vanish. The royal rift deepened. The couple gave a bombshell interview to Oprah Winfrey, alleging racism inside the royal family and declaring they'd been cut off financially. Harry published his memoir, Spare, unleashing a torrent of personal grievances and private family secrets. The rift, once a hairline fracture, became a chasm. Yet through it all, there was a lingering thread of possibility. A sense that, despite the bitterness, there remained space for reconciliation. Royal watchers speculated endlessly about whether Harry would return to London for his father's coronation. Would Charles, newly crowned, extend an olive branch to his younger son? Would Harry accept it? And that's what makes the events of recent days so astonishing. Because according to reports swirling through royal circles and tabloid headlines alike, King Charles has now made an irreversible declaration. He has only one son. He has, in effect, disowned Harry, stripped him of all standing, all claim, all place at the royal table. A move so bold, so final, that even veteran royal historians are struggling to find precedent. And here's where the human drama intensifies. Because according to multiple sources, as news of Charles's statement reached Montecito, Harry collapsed emotionally, physically, or perhaps both. Reports vary. Some say he required medical attention. Others insist it was a private moment of despair, shielded from public view, but no less devastating. The palace, for its part, is tight-lipped. Harry's spokespeople offer no comment. Meanwhile, the world is left to wonder, what does this mean for Harry's future? For his marriage? For the monarchy itself? This is where we begin, at the intersection of royal duty and personal identity, of fatherhood and monarchy, of love and rejection. In the next chapters, we're going to dive deeper than the headlines. We'll separate rumor from fact, examine the legal and financial fallout, and explore the emotional carnage behind palace walls. We'll ask uncomfortable questions. Was this inevitable? Did Harry push his father too far? Or is he the tragic casualty of an institution that cannot tolerate individuality? And through it all, we'll keep one truth at the forefront. No matter the titles, the palaces, the protocols, this is a story about a family, a father and a son, a man who once vowed to protect his children at all costs, and another who believed he could redefine what it meant to be royal, only to find himself cast out into the California sun, wondering whether the price of freedom was far higher than he ever imagined. So buckle in, because the story of Prince Harry's collapse in Montecito is more than gossip. It's a modern royal tragedy, unfolding in real time. And by the time we're finished, you may find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about the world's most famous family and the man who once called himself the Spare. Yet to truly grasp the magnitude of what's happening, we have to look past the royal crests and ceremonial robes and remind ourselves that Harry isn't just a prince, he's a man who, for better or worse, has lived his entire life under the magnifying glass of public opinion. A man who's tried, time and again, to carve out his own identity, only to be yanked back by invisible threads tied to an institution that is bigger than any individual. People forget that for decades, Harry's entire existence was shaped by the narrative of the good royal son versus the rebellious Spare. The British monarchy depends on appearances, hierarchy, tradition. And in that hierarchy, the heir is everything. The Spare exists as insurance. Harry knew this. He felt it. He's admitted as much in his memoirs, describing himself in terms that are heartbreaking for someone born into so much privilege, yet so little personal autonomy. To be born royal is to be born into a paradox: absolute public attention coupled with absolute personal restriction. Freedom, in many ways, was never part of Harry's royal contract. And yet, Harry wanted it desperately. He wanted a life where he could speak freely, where he could raise his family in privacy, where he could advocate for causes he believed in without the constant fear of tabloid retaliation. Some admired him for his courage. Others accused him of hypocrisy, pointing out the lucrative deals he and Meghan signed with global media giants while simultaneously demanding privacy. But whatever one thinks of Harry's choices, it's undeniable that he has become one of the most polarizing figures in modern royal history. To his critics, he's a traitor who aired the monarchy's secrets for profit. To his supporters, he's a man who refused to let an ancient institution destroy his mental health and that of his wife and children. The truth, as always, is more complicated. And perhaps that's why King Charles's recent statement lands with such an atomic blast. Because if it's true that the king has publicly declared he has only one son, then it's not merely a royal reshuffle. It's a renunciation of Harry's entire identity. It's a declaration that Harry is no longer family in any meaningful way. And for a man who has already lost so much, a mother, a home country, and any hope of a private existence, that might be the final blow. The public reaction to this alleged disownment has been ferocious. The hashtags alone tell the story. Hashtag I stand with Harry trending alongside hashtag King Charles one son. Talk show hosts debate whether the monarchy has gone too far. Newspapers print dueling op-eds, some decrying Harry's betrayal, others calling the king cruel and out of touch. Social media has become a digital battlefield. And amidst all this noise, the image of Harry collapsing in Montecito has become both a symbol and a mystery. Some reports describe a physical collapse, hinting at paramedics discreetly called to the Sussex's mansion, though such reports remain unconfirmed and veiled in rumor. Other sources suggest an emotional breakdown. Harry, shattered and inconsolable, blindsided by the depth of his father's rejection. And therein lies the question at the core of this story. How much can one man endure before the weight of family, duty, and relentless public scrutiny becomes too much? It's also impossible to ignore the historical context. For centuries, royal families have been ruthless in protecting their reputations. Siblings have been exiled, uncles imprisoned, entire branches of dynasties quietly erased from the narrative when they became inconvenient. But in modern times, we've rarely seen such a dramatic declaration from the monarch himself. Even in moments of scandal, Edward VIII's abdication, Princess Diana's bitter divorce, the monarchy maintained a public front of family unity, however brittle. To sever ties so publicly as Charles is rumored to have done is unprecedented in the modern royal era. Of course, questions remain about the statement's authenticity and context. Was it a private comment leaked to the press? A formal royal communication? Or an emotional outburst seized upon by tabloids hungry for drama? The palace's silence only fuels speculation. And silence, in the realm of royal communications, often speaks volumes. Meanwhile, the stakes for Harry are enormous. Beyond the personal pain, there are practical consequences. Titles, financial security, the question of inheritance. If Charles truly disowns Harry, it could ripple into every aspect of Harry's life. Would he remain a duke? Would his children lose titles or future claims? How would this affect his security arrangements? His business ventures tied to his royal identity? These are not merely symbolic questions. They have real-world financial, legal, and emotional consequences. And hovering over it all is the question of reconciliation. Is there any path back for Harry? Or has this decision created an unbridgeable chasm? Some royal experts argue that even the most dramatic royal rifts have eventually healed. Others insist this time is different, that the monarchy can no longer afford the distraction and damage Harry brings to its image. The idea that Charles might truly cut off his own son forever seems almost medieval, and yet, here we are, grappling with the possibility in the year 2025. The public, too, seems torn. Many feel sympathy for Harry, recalling the boy who lost his mother so publicly, who struggled to fit into the gilded cage of royal life. Others see him as a man who chose this path, who set fire to bridges and must now live with the consequences. For every person proclaiming support, there's another accusing him of attention-seeking and betrayal. Few figures in public life provoke such heated, visceral reactions. Yet for all the noise, at the core of this story is something profoundly human. A man seeking validation and love from his father, and a father trying to balance private affection with the weight of 1,000 years of royal duty. Charles, newly crowned, has the impossible task of preserving the monarchy's dignity while managing a family that has become a global soap opera. And Harry, once the fun prince, finds himself at the center of a storm he helped create but may no longer be able to control. It's hard not to feel the tragedy of it all. Because no matter how many millions Harry and Meghan have earned, no matter how sun-drenched their Montecito mansion may be, there's a loneliness in being cut off from the only family you've ever known, especially when that family wears crowns. So as we begin this deep dive, know that what you're about to hear is more than scandal. It's the anatomy of a royal implosion. A story where every detail matters, from whispered conversations behind palace walls to the strained silence of family dinners, from press leaks designed to sway public opinion to the private moments when a son wonders if he still has a place in his father's heart. This is the story of Prince Harry's alleged collapse in Montecito, in the wake of a father's stunning declaration. A story that could redefine the future of the monarchy or leave it more fractured than ever before. It began, as these royal crises so often do, with whispers. A hushed tip to a reporter over lunch in London. An overheard conversation in a Montecito cafe. A cryptic line in a tabloid column hinting that something seismic was about to erupt inside the House of Windsor. Then, in a matter of hours, whispers became roars. Headlines splashed across news sites from London to Los Angeles. The push notifications buzzed relentlessly on phones worldwide. King Charles declares he has only one son, Harry disowned. The exact words attributed to King Charles remain cloaked in mystery, carefully paraphrased and filtered through anonymous palace sources and selective leaks. But the substance was clear enough. The monarch, weary of what insiders described as constant turmoil, had finally drawn a line in the marble floor of Buckingham Palace. From this point forward, the king reportedly declared he recognized only Prince William as his son in an official capacity. Harry, it seemed, was out. The timing was savage. Britain was barely settling into the rhythms of Charles's reign. The new Caroline era was supposed to be about unity, stability, and a measured modernizing of tradition. Instead, the monarchy was thrown once again into chaos. And in California, far from the Gothic towers and gilded rooms of his birthright, Prince Harry was said to be blindsided. We don't yet know all the details of the moment Harry allegedly collapsed. Was it a sudden medical incident? A panic attack triggered by the shock? A quiet, devastating moment behind closed doors where the weight of years finally crushed him? Reports differ. Some say paramedics arrived discreetly at the Sussex's Montecito estate, whisked through private gates to avoid paparazzi lenses. Others insist Harry was simply overwhelmed emotionally, retreating into silence as Meghan tried to comfort him. The palace, typically stoic, refuses to confirm or deny anything. Harry's own spokesperson offered the coldest of statements, no comment at this time. Meanwhile, the world waits. If it all sounds like the plot of a Shakespearean drama, that's because it nearly is. The king estranged from his son. The son, exiled across the sea, longing for both freedom and the father's love he can't seem to secure. Court intrigue. Advisors whispering. Brothers divided. A nation watching with breathless fascination. And yet, strip away the royal trappings, and this story becomes painfully human. Because at its core, it's about a family. About a father's rejection. About a man who once belonged everywhere and now feels he belongs nowhere. Imagine, for a moment, being Harry. Waking up in a sunlit Montecito mansion, your two children safe in their rooms. Your wife beside you. The Pacific sparkling outside the window. And then, a phone buzzes. An aide, a friend, or a lawyer relays the message. Your father, the king, has announced you are no longer officially his son. What would run through your mind in those first seconds? Anger? Confusion? Guilt? A desperate desire to deny it's true? Eyewitnesses who claimed to be close to the couple say Harry was inconsolable. One source described him as pale, trembling, his voice cracking as he tried to process the words. Another said he disappeared for hours into his office, refusing to see anyone. And if that wasn't enough, the media frenzy began immediately. Helicopters circled above Montecito. Photographers loitered outside the estate gates. Reporters staked out coffee shops where Harry and Meghan have occasionally been spotted. News networks rolled breaking banners across screens. Prince Harry's royal status in tatters? King Charles turns his back on his youngest son. Yet even amid the chaos, there were moments of eerie quiet. Inside that Montecito mansion, a man who once strode through palaces and military bases, who once thrilled crowds of thousands, was left confronting the possibility that he had been officially cut off from his own blood. The royal family, true to form, stayed silent. Palace courtiers refused to answer direct questions. Statements released were masterclasses in ambiguity. His Majesty remains devoted to all members of his family, read one brief message from Buckingham Palace. But notably absent was any specific mention of Harry by name. And still, the world speculates. Is this a calculated move by Charles to protect the monarchy's future image? Is it an emotional decision driven by years of strain and hurt? Or is it merely the latest volley in an ongoing, bitter tug-of-war where private family pain becomes public spectacle? Historians are already weighing in. Some argue that Charles's actions reflect centuries of royal precedent, when the crown was ruthless in preserving stability. Others say this is unprecedented in modern times, a break so stark, so personal, it threatens to leave permanent scars not just on a family but on the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, Harry's allies insist this is a man pushed to his absolute limit. They point to his lifelong struggle to find a place in the royal machine, his trauma over Diana's death, and his repeated pleas for privacy and understanding. They argue that Harry, whatever his flaws, never wanted to be severed completely from his family. He wanted freedom, but also connection. So here we are, a king who may have just disowned his son, a son who may have suffered a collapse under the weight of rejection, a family drama unfolding on a global stage. And hanging over everything is one piercing question: what happens now? Because if Charles truly means to erase Harry from the royal narrative, the consequences could be seismic. For the monarchy, for public opinion, for Harry's children, who now stand at the center of a bitter debate over titles, heritage, and identity. As we move deeper into this story, we'll look at how we got here. We'll retrace the steps from Harry's earliest days as the fun-loving spare, to his break from royal life, to the crescendo of this crisis. We'll explore the fallout for both father and son, for the monarchy, and for the millions of people worldwide who can't seem to look away. Because whether you see Harry as victim or villain, there's no denying that this is one of the most explosive chapters in modern royal history. And it's unfolding, minute by minute, in the glare of cameras and the click of headlines. To understand the magnitude of Prince Harry's alleged collapse, and the king's bombshell declaration that he has only one son, we have to look backward. Before the Californian sunshine, before the cameras and controversies, before the glittering wedding that promised a modern fairy tale, we have to remember the boy who was born into a role he never chose, a spare prince in a 1,000-year-old monarchy built on tradition, hierarchy, and the unrelenting gaze of the world. Prince Harry came into the world on September 15, 1984, at St. Mary's Hospital in London, the same hospital where his older brother William had been born just 2 years earlier. From the moment he arrived, Harry carried a peculiar burden. Unlike William, who from his earliest moments was destined to inherit the crown, Harry's role was more ambiguous. He was insurance, a safeguard for the dynasty in case tragedy befell the heir. And from that peculiar place in royal succession, his life began. For much of his childhood, Harry lived under the gentle yet firm protection of his mother, Princess Diana. Diana adored her boys. She wanted them to know life beyond palace walls. She took them to theme parks, to McDonald's, to homeless shelters and hospitals. She taught them that despite being royal, they were also just boys, capable of empathy and kindness. But the same cameras that captured Diana's charity work also chronicled the family's unraveling. Harry's earliest years were shaped by the tension between his parents, Prince Charles and Princess Diana, whose marriage deteriorated in public view. The headlines of the late 1980s and early 1990s were a blur of rumors, affairs, tell-all interviews, and scandalous tapes. Even as a child, Harry could not have escaped the knowledge that his family life was not normal. Then, on August 31, 1997, the tragedy that would define him arrived. Diana died in a car crash in Paris while being chased by paparazzi. The world wept, but for 12-year-old Harry, the pain was private and immediate. His mother was gone, and in a moment forever etched into history, he walked behind her coffin alongside William, Charles, Prince Philip, and Diana's brother, Earl Spencer. Millions watched as the two young princes held back tears, faces set in an expression of grief and shock beyond their years. For Harry, Diana's death planted seeds of anger and confusion. He would later admit in interviews and his memoir that he struggled deeply for years, grappling with depression, anxiety, and resentment toward the press that he blamed for his mother's death. In public, he did his best to play the royal role: school appearances, polite smiles, waving to crowds, but behind the scenes, he was a young man spiraling. In his teenage years and early 20s, Harry became known as the royal rebel. He smoked, he drank, he fought with paparazzi who shadowed his every move. The tabloids eagerly chronicled his missteps, underage drinking at Highgrove, brawls with photographers outside London clubs, wearing a Nazi costume to a fancy dress party, an incident that would haunt him for years. The headlines were merciless. Harry seemed trapped in a feedback loop where every mistake fed the press narrative of a wayward prince. Yet beneath the wild child exterior, Harry possessed traits admired by many Britons: humor, charisma, a sense of authenticity. He often seemed more approachable than his older brother, more human and relatable. Crowds loved him for his off-the-cuff jokes, his emotional honesty, and his willingness to reveal flaws. In 2005, Harry made a decision that surprised many. He joined the British Army. Some assumed it was a publicity stunt to rehabilitate his image, but for Harry, the military offered structure, camaraderie, and, crucially, a reprieve from royal life. He trained at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst and earned the respect of fellow soldiers. Eventually, he deployed twice to Afghanistan, first as a forward air controller in 2007, then again as an Apache helicopter co-pilot gunner in 2012. For a while, Harry seemed genuinely happy. In uniform, he was not Prince Harry. He was just Captain Wales, another soldier among soldiers. But even the army couldn't fully shield him. In 2008, his first deployment was cut short when news leaked of his presence on the front lines, putting him and his unit in danger. It was another reminder that Harry's life was not truly his own. After leaving the army in 2015, Harry turned his attention to philanthropy. He launched the Invictus Games, a sports competition for wounded and sick service members, inspired by his time in the military and his own struggles with mental health. The Invictus Games quickly became one of his proudest achievements, earning admiration worldwide. Here was Harry at his best, using his royal platform to help others, forging genuine connections with veterans and their families. Yet Harry's relationship with the press remained fraught. The same cameras that applauded him for Invictus relentlessly documented his private life. Every new girlfriend sparked tabloid speculation. His attempts at privacy were dismissed as hypocrisy. Royal watchers dissected his every move, comparing him unfavorably to his brother. William was steady, dutiful, the perfect heir. Harry was volatile, unpredictable, the problematic spare. Then, in 2016, Harry met Meghan Markle. Their connection was instant. Meghan was everything the British royal establishment did not expect: American, biracial, divorced, an actress with her own career and opinions. To Harry, she was a lifeline, a woman who shared his passion for charity work, who encouraged him to speak openly about mental health, and who promised a partner's loyalty in a world he increasingly viewed as hostile. The early months of their relationship were blissful yet cloaked in secrecy. But when the media discovered Meghan's identity, the coverage turned ugly fast. Racial undertones colored the headlines. Meghan was branded difficult, ambitious, manipulative. The tabloids fixated on every detail of her life. Harry, protective and furious, issued an unprecedented public statement condemning the racial undertones and outright sexism and racism directed at Meghan. Despite the storm, Harry and Meghan married in 2018 at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. For one bright moment, the royal family seemed united. The wedding was a dazzling global spectacle, blending royal tradition with modern multicultural touches. Millions tuned in. Many hoped this marriage might signal a new era for the monarchy. But fractures emerged quickly. Behind palace walls, tensions simmered. Meghan reportedly struggled to adjust to royal protocols and the suffocating scrutiny of royal life. Rumors of rifts between Meghan and Kate, William and Harry, fueled a media-feeding frenzy. Harry, caught between loyalty to his wife and to the institution, began to retreat further. By 2019, the Sussexes had announced plans to split from the joint communications office they shared with William and Kate. In a rare public admission of strain, Harry confirmed in an interview that he and William were on different paths. The family's carefully curated image was beginning to crack. Then, in January 2020, the bomb dropped. Harry and Meghan announced via Instagram that they intended to step back as senior members of the royal family, seeking financial independence and the freedom to split time between North America and the UK. The palace was reportedly blindsided. Negotiations ensued. Ultimately, Harry and Meghan relinquished royal duties, royal patronages, and public funding. Their exit, dubbed Megxit by the tabloids, changed the monarchy forever. Harry traded palaces for palm trees. In Montecito, he and Meghan set up a new life, signing multi-million-dollar deals with streaming giants. Yet the rift with the royal family only grew. In 2021, the couple gave an explosive interview to Oprah Winfrey, leveling serious allegations against the royal family, including conversations about the potential skin color of their future child. The interview sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace and reignited debates about racism, tradition, and the monarchy's future. Harry's memoir, Spare, published in 2023, revealed even more personal grievances: physical altercations with William, conflicts with Charles, deep resentment over his royal upbringing. Some praised Harry for his honesty. Others accused him of exploiting private family matters for profit. Through it all, Harry maintained he was simply telling his truth, a man shaped by trauma, trying to protect his wife and children from the same fate that befell his mother. Yet the relationship with his family seemed to deteriorate further with every revelation. And now we arrive at the present crisis. King Charles, newly crowned and seeking stability for his reign, has reportedly made the most devastating move yet, publicly declaring he has only one son. For Harry, it's the culmination of a lifelong journey defined by love and loss, duty and rebellion, hope and heartbreak. Despair, it seems, may have finally been cast out for good. But even as rumors swirl of Harry's collapse in Montecito, questions linger. Has the final page of this royal saga truly been written? Or is this simply the beginning of the next, even more turbulent chapter? In every great family saga, there's a moment when the seeds of conflict are sown, sometimes so subtly that no one realizes the consequences until years later. For Prince Harry and the royal family, those seeds were scattered long before the cameras captured Meghan's first curtsy or before Oprah sat in her California garden with her now famous "Were you silent, or were you silenced?" To truly understand how Harry and King Charles have come to this explosive point, an alleged disownment, a reported collapse, we have to examine the early signs. Because while the public may have seen the monarchy as an unbreakable institution behind the palace walls, cracks were already beginning to spread. One of the first and most potent indicators of tension arrived not with Meghan, but with Harry's very identity as the spare. The concept sounds archaic, almost medieval, but it's the bedrock of royal succession. The heir is the future king. The spare exists in case fate strikes the heir down. From childhood, Harry was told, sometimes jokingly, sometimes not, that his role was secondary. He was there as a backup plan. It's a burden both unique and cruel, breeding insecurity, competition, and the constant sense of being overshadowed. Harry often tried to laugh it off, but the resentment was there, simmering beneath the surface. In interviews and his own writings, he's admitted to feeling like an outsider in his own family. Even as a boy, he noticed the way people deferred to William, the way his older brother was prepared for destiny, while Harry felt like a royal extra, floating on the periphery of the grand narrative. As the brothers grew older, those differences only widened. William was diligent, cautious, protective of the institution. Harry was more impulsive, passionate, emotionally open. While William followed the path laid out for him, elite schools, university, royal engagements, Harry struggled to find a place where he felt both useful and free. Yet despite these tensions, for years the two brothers projected an image of unity. They carried out engagements together. They laughed side by side at events, traded jokes in public, and seemed bound by the shared trauma of losing their mother. The public loved the idea of the royal brothers as a team, a modern-day duo navigating the monarchy's ancient rituals. But the seeds of rivalry were quietly taking root. Royal insiders have long whispered that William sometimes resented Harry's popularity. Harry, despite, or perhaps because of, his rebellious streak, often connected more easily with the public. Crowds adored his humor, his casual demeanor, his willingness to break from royal stiffness. In many ways, Harry seemed like the relatable prince, the one who might share a beer with you at the pub. Meanwhile, William bore the weight of expectation. As the future king, he couldn't afford to be too accessible or too vulnerable. He was the safe pair of hands, the embodiment of royal continuity. And while he and Harry loved each other as brothers, those diverging roles planted tension that would one day explode. Yet even amid the delicate sibling balance, Harry seemed to manage, until Meghan entered the picture. When Harry met Meghan Markle in 2016, he was instantly smitten. She was beautiful, articulate, confident. She shared his passion for humanitarian work and seemed to understand the unique pressures of public life. For a man who'd long struggled to find a partner who could navigate his royal reality, Meghan appeared to be the answer to years of searching. But their relationship introduced new variables into the royal family's fragile ecosystem. Meghan wasn't just any girlfriend. She was American, an actress, divorced, and, crucially, biracial. Her background was a significant departure from the traditionally aristocratic circles from which royal brides had long been drawn. At first, the royal family publicly welcomed her. Meghan joined Harry at high-profile events. She appeared with him at the Invictus Games. In official photos, she beamed beside the royal family. But behind the scenes, the adjustment was anything but smooth. Palace staff and insiders have spoken, often anonymously, about cultural clashes between Meghan and the rigid traditions of royal life. The royal household operates with military precision. There are unwritten rules about everything: who speaks first, how one dresses, the protocol for public statements, the pecking order at events. Meghan, accustomed to Hollywood independence and direct communication, reportedly struggled to conform to the silent, hierarchical world she'd married into. There were hints of trouble early on. British tabloids began publishing stories about Meghan being difficult, citing sources who claimed she was demanding or disrespectful toward staff. Stories swirled of staff leaving their posts amid complaints of a challenging work environment. Whether these claims were fair or fueled by cultural misunderstandings remains hotly debated. Then came the infamous story about Meghan and Kate. Reports claimed Meghan had made Kate cry in the days leading up to Meghan's wedding. Later, Meghan insisted in her interview with Oprah that the reverse was true, that Kate had made her cry, and later apologized. While it might seem trivial, this single narrative became a flashpoint for how the press, and perhaps the palace, perceived Meghan as a disruptor, a potential threat to royal unity. Meanwhile, Harry was transforming before the public's eyes. Once the fun-loving spare, he became increasingly wary of the press. His anger over their treatment of Meghan was palpable. In 2016, he issued a blistering statement condemning the racial undertones and sexism in coverage of his girlfriend. No other royal in recent memory had spoken so directly or emotionally about the media's role in personal suffering. By the time Harry and Meghan married in May 2018, the divide within the royal family was already widening. The wedding, broadcast worldwide, was a dazzling spectacle blending royal tradition with modern multicultural touches. Yet, even amid the pageantry, there were murmurs that Harry and William were drifting apart. Some insiders claimed William had cautioned Harry to slow down his relationship with Meghan, advice Harry took as criticism. From that moment, the brothers' bond reportedly began to fracture. In the months following the wedding, tensions intensified. Harry and Meghan's decision to split their household from William and Kate's was viewed by many as a sign of deeper fissures. Previously, the brothers shared a joint office at Kensington Palace, pooling staff and coordinating public engagements. Now, Harry and Meghan established their own team at Buckingham Palace, fueling speculation that the Fab Four were no longer so fab or even a four. The tabloids seized on every rumor. Articles hinted at screaming matches between Harry and William. Headlines questioned Meghan's behavior toward staff. Photographers captured icy moments between the couples at public events. Analysts and royal watchers dissected the smallest gestures: averted gazes, forced smiles, stilted bow. But perhaps the most significant sign that the royal rift was real arrived in Harry's own words. In an interview for the ITV documentary Harry and Meghan, An African Journey, filmed during their 2019 tour of Southern Africa, Harry acknowledged openly that he and William were on different paths. It was the first time he publicly admitted the rumors weren't entirely baseless. The revelation stunned royal watchers. For a family famed for its stiff upper lip and discreet silence, Harry's candor was extraordinary. The royal institution's unofficial motto, "Never complain, never explain," had been breached. Then came 2020, the year everything shattered. Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back as senior royals. It wasn't just a family decision, it was a constitutional crisis. How could two prominent royals forge a half-in, half-out existence? Could they keep titles while pursuing commercial deals? How would their security be funded? Negotiations between the Sussexes and the palace were tense, by all accounts. In the end, Harry and Meghan agreed to forfeit royal duties, public funding, and certain honors. Harry was stripped of his honorary military titles, a loss that reportedly devastated him. The final agreement left both sides bruised. Yet the public rift only widened. Harry and Meghan's 2021 interview with Oprah detonated any remaining hope of a quiet resolution. In front of millions of viewers, they aired grievances about racism, lack of support from the royal institution, and suicidal thoughts Meghan suffered during her time as a working royal. It was as close as modern Britain had come to a royal war of words in prime time. The monarchy scrambled to contain the damage. Recollections may vary, the palace said in a famously terse statement. But for many, the damage was done. Harry and Charles's relationship seemed particularly strained. Charles was said to be deeply hurt and bewildered by his son's public accusations. Harry, meanwhile, believed he was speaking his truth and protecting his family from the fate that befell his mother. Through 2022 and 2023, the rift solidified. Harry's memoir, Spare, painted Charles as distant, William as temperamental, and the royal family as a cold machine indifferent to personal suffering. Royal supporters accused Harry of monetizing his grievances. Harry insisted he was simply trying to tell his side of the story. And so, the stage was set. A monarchy battered by scandal, a father and son entrenched in separate worlds, and a public unsure whom to believe. By the time Charles ascended the throne in 2023, some insiders believed reconciliation was still possible. Others whispered that Charles felt the only way forward was to sever the tie entirely, to protect the crown and the legacy he'd waited a lifetime to inherit. And that brings us to today, to a world where headlines proclaim that King Charles has only one son, and where Harry, thousands of miles from the palace gates, allegedly collapses under the weight of it all. In the chapters to come, we'll delve into Harry's new life in Montecito, the bombshell moment of Charles's announcement, and the emotional and political fallout that threatens to reshape the monarchy forever. After the storm of Megxit, after the formal exits, the stripped titles, and the cool statements from Buckingham Palace, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle crossed an ocean seeking a new beginning. They weren't merely leaving a country, they were attempting to abandon a life written for them before they were born. For Harry, Montecito became the stage for the grand experiment. Could a royal prince become just a man? Could he be Harry, without the Windsor weight pressing on his shoulders? Montecito, California, seems an unlikely refuge for a man born among the palaces and traditions of Britain. Nestled in the Santa Ynez Mountains, it's a place of quiet streets shaded by massive oaks and eucalyptus trees. Bougainvillea drapes over white stucco walls. Mansions sit behind tall gates, hidden from the casual passerby. This is the domain of Hollywood elites, tech billionaires, and retired moguls. Here, privacy is not merely a courtesy, it's a currency fiercely guarded by the community. When Harry and Meghan purchased their 9-bedroom, 16-bathroom mansion in 2020, the transaction set tongues wagging. The estate sprawled over 7 acres, featuring rose gardens, ancient olive trees, a tennis court, a pool, a guest house, and even a chicken coop where Meghan claimed she and Harry found simple peace tending to rescued hens. The price tag was reported around $14.7 million, a symbol, to critics, that even as Harry claimed to be seeking normalcy, he was hardly slumming it. Yet the appeal of Montecito went beyond wealth. For Harry, it was the furthest point, geographically and emotionally, from the institution that had defined and suffocated his life. In Montecito, there were no royal courtiers hovering outside his door. No photographers camped on palace gates. No centuries-old protocols dictating how he should sit, stand, speak, or think. At least, that was the dream. In reality, even the palm trees couldn't entirely shield Harry and Meghan from the world's curiosity. News helicopters occasionally hovered over their property. Paparazzi rented houses nearby, hoping to snap a glimpse of Archie or Lilibet playing in the garden. Local Montecito residents complained, discreetly, that the couple's presence attracted unwanted attention. Harry and Meghan's desire for privacy often clashed with the relentless appetite of global media. But despite the challenges, Harry tried to build a new identity in California. For the first time, he could make choices purely his own. He could dress casually, grow a scruffy beard, go hiking in the hills without a royal protection officer at his elbow. He embraced American customs, driving himself, frequenting local cafes, and exploring California's coastal towns. Some locals say they occasionally spot Harry browsing the shelves of Montecito's upscale grocery stores, or jogging along the quiet roads near Butterfly Beach. One shop owner recalls Harry buying organic produce and chatting about the California sunshine. In those moments, Harry seemed genuinely happy, just another man trying to live an ordinary life. Professionally, Harry and Meghan quickly set to work creating their new brand. The couple signed multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, determined to produce documentaries, podcasts, and scripted content centered around issues they cared about: mental health, social justice, environmental sustainability. For Harry, this was more than business. It was his chance to craft a narrative that belonged entirely to him. One of his first major post-royal projects was The Me You Can't See, a mental health documentary series co-created with Oprah Winfrey. In it, Harry spoke candidly about his trauma, therapy, and the lasting scars from his mother's death. He recounted panic attacks, feelings of helplessness, and the persistent sense of being trapped in the royal system. It was raw, unfiltered, and for many viewers, deeply moving. Yet critics argued that Harry seemed determined to stay in the spotlight even as he demanded privacy. British tabloids accused him of hypocrisy, claiming he'd traded royal duties for commercial gain. Harry's defenders countered that he was finally speaking his truth, using his platform for causes that mattered. The debate only intensified with each new project. Montecito life was not without its personal joys. In June 2021, Harry and Meghan welcomed their daughter, Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Naming her after the Queen's family nickname and Diana's legacy was a symbolic bridge to the royal world Harry had left behind. Harry spoke often about his determination to give his children the childhood he never had, one away from tabloid frenzy, where hugs and emotional expression were encouraged rather than stifled. But even as Harry tried to carve out his new life, the rift with his family loomed over everything. Friends close to him described nights when Harry would sit in his Montecito study, scrolling through British news sites, reading brutal headlines about himself and Meghan. He worried about his father's health, about his brother's anger, about the future of the monarchy he once loved yet couldn't remain part of. Locals sometimes noticed Harry looking preoccupied or tense. A Montecito yoga instructor who once taught Meghan said Harry arrived for a private session, only to spend most of it talking about family stress rather than meditating. Even paradise couldn't erase the royal wounds. Meanwhile, Montecito's famously discreet community tried to maintain boundaries. Oprah lived just down the road. Ellen DeGeneres, Ariana Grande, and other celebrities dotted the neighborhood. In most places, residents would have bragged about sharing sidewalks with royals, but in Montecito, name-dropping was considered gauche. People tried, largely, to leave Harry and Meghan alone. Yet privacy was fragile. A drone once hovered over the Sussex estate, sparking a police investigation. Photographers camped out near local parks hoping for glimpses of Archie's birthday party. Tabloid reporters posed as delivery workers trying to gain access to the gated community. Harry's new California life became a paradox. He was free, and still trapped. Independent, and yet inextricably bound to the family and country he'd left behind. Financially, Harry's life changed as well. No longer receiving funds from the sovereign grant, Harry and Meghan funded their security and lifestyle independently. Some critics accused them of cashing in on royal connections to secure lucrative media deals. Harry insisted he'd been cut off financially and had no choice but to support his family through commercial work. Harry's relationship with the press remained as complicated in Montecito as it had been in London. He filed lawsuits against tabloids for invasion of privacy and defamation. In some cases, he won significant settlements. Yet with every legal battle, the press attention only intensified. Behind the scenes, friends described Harry as a man caught between worlds. He wanted to protect Meghan and their children from the horrors he'd endured. He wanted to speak out against institutions and media practices he believed were harmful. And yet he missed certain elements of his old life: the camaraderie of royal duties, the military connections, the bond with William that once seemed unbreakable. Local community members reported mixed impressions. Some admired Harry's genuine attempts to integrate into the area, supporting local businesses and charities. Others whispered about the constant drama surrounding the Sussex name, worried Montecito's reputation as a quiet enclave was under siege. Amid this complex new existence, Harry pressed on with personal growth. He spoke openly about therapy, meditation, and trauma healing. In interviews, he described discovering mindfulness, learning to set boundaries, and striving to be a better husband and father. California, he suggested, was helping him become the man he wanted to be. Yet the shadow of the royal feud loomed over every sunrise. Whether Harry was hosting a mental health webinar, recording a podcast, or strolling the Montecito farmers market, the question lingered. Would he ever reconcile with his family? Or was the rift permanent? And then came the latest headline: King Charles allegedly declaring he has only one son. The news detonated in Montecito like an earthquake. For Harry, who had struggled so hard to redefine himself as an independent man, this wasn't merely another tabloid scandal. It was an existential blow, striking at the heart of who he was. Because Montecito might be thousands of miles away from Buckingham Palace, but for Prince Harry, the past is never truly past. Even in paradise, the echoes of royal corridors continue to follow him. In the next section, we'll examine the precise moment when Charles delivered his shocking declaration and how this single statement has reverberated through royal circles, the British press, and Harry's carefully constructed Californian refuge. In the vast chronicles of the British monarchy, few declarations have reverberated as powerfully as the words allegedly uttered by King Charles III in recent days, a statement so stark, so final, that even seasoned royal watchers are struggling to comprehend its full implications. "I have only one son," Charles is reported to have said, effectively severing Prince Harry from the royal family in the most public, devastating manner yet. For many, this was the nuclear option. Not merely a royal rebuke, but a familial excommunication. A father disowning his son in a move that threatened to redraw the very map of the Windsor dynasty. And though rumors have swirled for years that Charles was losing patience with Harry's relentless revelations, few believed the king would go so far. Until now. The origins of this bombshell statement are murky, as royal crises often are. Some say the words were spoken during a private meeting at Buckingham Palace, attended only by senior advisors and select family members. Others insist Charles made the comment in frustration, perhaps not intending it for public consumption. Yet somehow, the sentiment leaked, dribbling out through palace courtiers, picked up by journalists eager for the next chapter in the royal soap opera. According to one palace source who spoke under strict anonymity, the conversation unfolded during a heated discussion about the monarchy's future. The room, draped in centuries-old tapestries and polished wood paneling, was thick with tension. Advisors laid out polling data showing public fatigue with royal scandals. There were concerns over trust in the monarchy, especially among younger generations. And looming over everything was the question, what to do about Harry? For Charles, the problem was twofold. As a father, he was said to be wounded and bewildered by Harry's public disclosures. Accusations of coldness, indifference, and an upbringing devoid of emotional warmth. As a monarch, he faced pressure to stabilize the institution he'd waited 70 years to inherit. The insider described Charles as exhausted, his voice cracking as he said, "I have only one son." Some present reportedly tried to soften the statement, suggesting Charles reconsider, but the king was resolute. Another account suggests the king delivered his message indirectly. Rather than making an official proclamation, Charles allegedly allowed his staff to leak the sentiment to selected journalists, ensuring it reached Harry without the need for a direct confrontation. It was, in some interpretations, classic palace maneuvering, allowing Charles to send a message while maintaining royal dignity. Yet regardless of how it was communicated, the meaning was unmistakable. Charles was signaling to the world, and perhaps to Harry himself, that the bond between father and son was broken beyond repair. Reactions within royal circles were immediate and intense. Courtiers scrambled to control the narrative, issuing carefully crafted statements filled with diplomatic ambiguity. "The king continues to hold deep affection for all members of his family," read one short note from Buckingham Palace. But noticeably absent was any direct mention of Harry or any denial of the alleged statement. Privately, some royal advisors were said to be horrified by the king's bluntness. One longtime palace aide reportedly warned that such a drastic measure risked casting Charles as vindictive rather than regal. "This isn't just about Harry," the aide said. "It's about how the monarchy looks to the world. Exiling your own son is a dangerous precedent." Others, however, believed the king had no choice. After years of revelations, interviews, and Harry's bombshell memoir, patience had run thin. A senior palace official reportedly remarked, "His Majesty must protect the crown. There comes a point where you can't keep papering over the cracks." Prince Harry made his choices. Outside the palace, the shockwaves rippled across the media landscape. Newspapers from London to New York splashed the story across their front pages. British tabloids called it the final royal divorce. American talk shows dissected every possible motive, every nuance of the palace statements. Social media exploded into fierce debate, with hashtags like #KingCharles1Son and #StandWithHarry trending worldwide. Historians struggle to find a modern precedent for such a stark declaration. Even during the bitterest royal scandals of the 20th century, such as the abdication of Edward VIII, the royal family maintained a semblance of private connection, however strained. Never before had a monarch publicly disowned his son in such unequivocal terms. But for Charles, the calculus was reportedly simple. As king, he could not afford constant turmoil. Each new Harry revelation threatened to drag the monarchy into a media circus. Polling data reportedly showed declining confidence in the royal institution among younger generations, especially in the wake of allegations of racism and emotional neglect. For Charles, preserving the monarchy's image was paramount, even if it meant sacrificing his relationship with Harry. Several royal commentators have pointed out that Charles has always been torn between his public role and private emotions. As Prince of Wales, he was frequently criticized for appearing distant, reserved, even cold. His relationship with both his sons has long been complicated, shaped by the trauma of Diana's death and the strict expectations of royal life. One royal biographer noted, "Charles is a man who has waited his entire life to be king. Now that he's finally on the throne, he's determined to eliminate anything that threatens the monarchy's stability." Sadly, that seems to include his own son. Meanwhile, Harry's allies painted a different picture. Sources close to the Duke of Sussex claimed the king's statement was an act of cruelty, driven less by royal duty and more by personal resentment. This is a father punishing his son because the truth makes him uncomfortable, one friend reportedly said. Harry has spoken out because he's trying to break the cycle of pain. To be met with total rejection, it's devastating. The timing of Charles's alleged declaration has fueled further speculation. Some believe it was strategically calculated to coincide with ongoing discussions about royal titles and security funding. Stripping Harry of any official recognition could simplify legal questions about protection and financial obligations. Others see it as a purely emotional decision, a weary father finally declaring enough is enough. Legal experts have weighed in on the potential consequences. While the monarchy is a family institution, it's also a legal entity bound by constitutional conventions and centuries of precedent. Could Charles strip Harry of his Duke of Sussex title entirely? Might Harry's children lose their titles? Would Harry lose his place in the line of succession? Opinions vary. Some lawyers argue that while the king holds significant discretion over royal titles, outright removal could spark constitutional controversy. But beyond legalities, there's the human cost. The idea of a father severing ties with his son is heartrending under any circumstances. Multiply that pain by the weight of centuries of royal tradition and the glare of global media, and the magnitude becomes staggering. Journalists stationed outside Buckingham Palace described a tense, subdued atmosphere in the days following the leak. Staff entered and exited the gates with stony expressions. Tourists gathered at the railings, hoping to catch a glimpse of royal vehicles, whispering to each other about what the future might hold. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in Montecito, Harry's world reportedly came crashing down. Friends say he was blindsided, having believed that despite all the rancor, the bond between father and son was unbreakable. One source described Harry as utterly shattered, spending hours pacing the grounds of his estate, refusing to take calls. Meghan, according to the same source, was fiercely protective, urging Harry to ignore the noise and focus on their children. But the damage was done. For Harry, the alleged statement from his father isn't simply a political maneuver. It's the culmination of a lifelong struggle between his royal identity and his personal desire for freedom. Since childhood, Harry has been torn between duty and authenticity. He's tried to forge his own path, to speak candidly about mental health, to shield his family from the same fate that claimed his mother. But each step toward independence has seemingly driven him further from the family he once called his own. Public opinion remains fiercely divided. Some believe Charles's decision was necessary, a monarch protecting the institution from constant drama. Others view it as an act of unforgivable cruelty, proof that the monarchy values reputation over familial love. And so, the British monarchy finds itself once again at a crossroads. A king on the throne who may have cut off his own son. A prince across the ocean, reeling from the deepest wound yet. A global audience riveted by a family saga that seems to grow darker with each chapter. One royal commentator summed it up this way: "This isn't just a family crisis. It's an existential moment for the monarchy." If a king can disown his son to protect the crown, what does that say about the institution's humanity? And what does it say about the cost of being royal? As speculation continues to swirl, one truth remains. The monarchy, despite all its pomp and pageantry, is still a family at its core. And when a father disowns his son, the consequences are not merely political, they're personal, painful, and potentially irreversible. In every great drama, there comes a moment when the weight of events crashes down upon a single individual, breaking something fundamental inside them. For Prince Harry, that moment reportedly arrived in the sun-drenched stillness of Montecito, a world away from the palace gates and the crowds who once cheered his every move. When news reached Harry that his father, King Charles III, had allegedly declared he had only one son, the shock was instantaneous. Even after years of estrangement, of mutual grievances aired on global platforms, Harry had clung to a fragile hope that the royal bond between father and son was unbreakable. For all his public statements, his memoirs, and his newfound Californian identity, Harry had never completely severed his emotional tether to his family. Sources close to the Sussexes describe the hours after the news broke as a period of chaos and emotional devastation. One individual, reportedly a friend of the couple, recounted how Harry first reacted with disbelief. He was said to have stared at his phone, scrolling through news alerts, reading the same phrases over and over. "I have only one son." It didn't make sense to him. He kept repeating, "He can't mean that. He's my father." But denial quickly gave way to anguish. Meghan, according to several accounts, found Harry pacing their kitchen, muttering fragments of sentences, unable to form coherent thoughts. He reportedly refused to take calls from advisors and friends. His security team discreetly tightened the perimeter around the estate as paparazzi began circling, eager for photos of the prince in distress. Some reports suggest Harry retreated to his private office, slamming the door and locking it behind him. From outside, staff allegedly heard muffled sobs, then silence. Hours passed. Meghan, determined to protect her husband's privacy, kept everyone away, insisting that Harry needed space to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The term collapse has been used in headlines and whispers alike, but its exact meaning remains elusive. Did Harry physically collapse, requiring medical attention? Or was it a metaphorical collapse, a psychological breaking point for a man who has spent his entire life trying to reconcile personal happiness with royal duty? One Montecito source claims a doctor was called to the Sussexes' home as a precaution. Harry was reportedly checked for dehydration and exhaustion. Another account, however, insists Harry never lost consciousness, but experienced an emotional spiral, marked by panic attacks, chest pains, and uncontrollable shaking. Whether physical or emotional, the incident marks the most severe fallout yet in Harry's long, painful journey away from the royal family. Friends describe him as a man caught between profound grief and simmering rage. He reportedly vacillated between blaming himself for the rupture and feeling bitterly betrayed by a father who, despite his faults, Harry still loves deeply. One confidant, speaking anonymously, shared that Harry kept asking a single question in the hours after the announcement. Was all of it for nothing? Meaning the years of trying to forge peace, the attempts to explain himself, the public disclosures he believed were necessary to protect his wife and children. For Harry, Charles's declaration felt like an erasure. Not merely of titles or royal standing, but of his very identity. Insiders say Meghan did everything in her power to stabilize Harry during this emotional freefall. She reportedly canceled several scheduled video calls and meetings, cleared their calendar for the week, and focused entirely on supporting her husband. She was terrified for him, said one source. She knows better than anyone how fragile his mental health has been since childhood. She feared this would push him past his limits. Amid this storm, Harry reportedly insisted on shielding his children from any sign of turmoil. Despite his personal anguish, he was determined that Archie and Lilibet should not witness their father unraveling. On the day the news broke, Harry reportedly spent time reading to his children, forcing a smile, trying to create an air of normalcy in the midst of chaos. But beneath that veneer, Harry's world was crumbling. Multiple sources confirm that Harry was deeply concerned about the practical implications of being officially disowned. Would this affect his children's titles and security? Would he lose the legal right to certain royal properties, inheritances, or privileges? Lawyers were said to be quietly consulted in the days following the announcement, exploring whether Charles's declaration carried any formal legal weight or was simply a personal statement of estrangement. Yet beyond legalities, the emotional toll was staggering. For Harry, Charles's words cut deeper than any previous scandal.